It's only when we are at peace with ourselves that we can engage meaningfully for justice. It's difficult not to get so angry and worked up by the
Yes.
rhetoric. We can only take action in a responsible way when we are calm and we're not acting out of hate.
Dr. Tazuko Shibusawa is a co-director of the Japan Mindfulness Collaborative, holds a doctorate in social work from UCLA, and specializes in family therapy, trauma studies, and mindfulness-based psychotherapies.
We're living with symptoms of depression, but that doesn't mean we are a depressed person.
Mindfulness in terms of mental health is to recognize we're more than a diagnosis someone gives us or not, seeing the humanity in
Right.
themselves rather than just a broken part because of a
Right.
diagnosis. Everyone is carrying something we're dealing with.
Yeah, we're human.
We're human.
Perhaps we can't heal ourselves. We can only heal in relationship with others.
Hello, everyone. I am so honored to share today's conversation with Dr. Tazuko Shibusawa, a dear colleague from Tokyo, Japan. She brings such a vast wealth of knowledge, wisdom, and humanity to her personal and professional life. Dr. Shibusawa received her master's and doctorate degree in social work at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and completed her postgraduate training in family therapy, trauma studies, and mindfulness based psychotherapies. So interesting. She was on the faculty at Columbia University and New York University, where she served as the Associate Dean and Director of a Master's Program in Social Work. She is the co director of the Japan Mindfulness Collaborative, which is a member of the Global Mindfulness Collaborative, GMC, an international network of mindfulness based stress reduction, or MBSR, teacher trainers. She also currently serves on the board of a GMC, and she teaches MBSR programs, teacher training, and mindful self compassion through the Tokyo Mindfulness Center. Friends, you don't want to miss this conversation as we're covering key topics that impact us all, including living in this difficult time, navigating through aging, exploring what it means to be fearless, and how mindfulness and mindful self compassion can support mental well being. Dr. Shibusawa, a warm welcome to you to the Pause to Elevate podcast.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to be with you, Custom. I remember you. You were one of the teachers when I took my MBSR teacher training class in California. So,
Oh, what a treat.
remember, it's so lovely to be with you.
What a treat truly is to continue connecting with you. And I'm truly thrilled to have a chance to share this conversation. And there's so much that I want to ask you about.
Mm.
So I wonder if we can begin with what led you just to mindfulness itself and including it as such a big part of your life, personally and professionally.
Sure. So I'm Japanese by
Mhm,
birth, and I grew up in Japan, which is a Buddhist country. But
mhm,
I really didn't understand what Buddhism was. And it was in college when I was in the US that I started taking classes about Buddhism. And that's
mhm,
when I sort of thought, oh, so that's what part of my culture is all about. So it was a wonderful time in my life learning about Buddhism.
mm,
And then later on, much later on, I started reading Thich Nhat Hanh's work,
mm,
which I found really helpful. And being an academic at that time, it was a very stressful time, and I always found his works very helpful. And
mm.
actually, 9/11 happened when I was in New York. I was in New York when
Oh,
9/11
wow.
happened,
I
and
didn't know that
actually
actually.
And Thich Nhat Hanh was invited, and I wasn't able to get into Riverside Church where he was giving a lecture, but he was there right after. And so I started reading his book about anger. And so that really
Mm,
drew me more into mindfulness at that time. And then I
mm.
started teaching at New York University School of Social Work, and it was very stressful. And so I went and took the MBSR class at the New
Ah,
York Insight. The moment I went into the room, it's a meditation center, I just felt so at home, the
Mm.
way I do when I go to Kyoto, which is a historical place in Japan where all the temples are. And it was
Ah.
like walking into a temple garden, that same kind of ease and serenity I felt. And it was like,
Mm.
wow, this is like coming home in some way.
In New York.
Yeah, in New York,
Yeah.
in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the class was taught by John Aaron, who ended up being, my teacher and now a colleague. And so it was stress from work.
Mm.
Um, in terms of being an administrator, associate dean, it was stressful, but it was also a time in New York when there was a lot of activities around police brutality against people of color, especially
Mm.
Black. Right, the
Yeah.
Eric Garland incident, and many, many. And so there were a lot of marches. The Black Lives Matter started to really,
Yeah.
become active, and so in class, talking about race and racial conflict really activates all of us, whether we're part
Mm.
of the majority or whether we're part of the marginalized group.
Yeah.
There's so much, and so, that's when I also decided that I really wanted to see or find out how mindfulness helps with this reactivity, and
Mm.
so that's sort of another path in which I entered mindfulness, and I was taking classes at a place called Nalanda Institute in New York City.
Mm.
They have a different trainings, and I took a 1-year training on mindfulness and psychotherapy because my background is clinical social
Yeah.
work, and I
Yeah.
used to work as a psychotherapist. And they have capstone projects. And so
Mm.
my capstone was on Buddhism and racism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I read about different African American Buddhists, Buddhist teachers,
Mm.
and how they entered through the trauma of racism, or they talk about racial trauma
Mm.
and how Buddhism became a refuge for them
Ah.
and a place for them to then become socially engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was really helpful for me because in class I would get activated. I felt so inadequate in my skills in talking about race in the classroom.
Mm.
Mm.
You've mentioned so many interesting, deep things that I'd love to unpack. And
Yeah.
even as we go back to when you're beginning your share of how you got started with a book, Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese monk, late Vietnamese monk, amazing, powerful teacher who passed away,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But there's something about being with anger. I guess it was a very difficult time. Like right now, there's a
Right.
lot of anger right now that's happening on a lot of things, socio-political level, like many levels. So, what stood out for you about this way of where mindfulness supports working with anger?
Right. So that's such an important question.
Mm.
First of all, it's to recognize what's happening, right?
Mm.
So recognizing how shows up in my body, but also then what kind of thoughts does anger create in me?
Mm.
And then I start believing my thoughts. And so then mindfulness says, okay, you are not your thoughts. And so it gives me a distance from my thoughts or helps me not believe in my thoughts. So that's one. And another is being compassionate towards myself. I'm angry because it hurts. I'm angry because I'm
Ah.
anxious. This is horrible. So there's something in myself that's reacting to this anger that I need to attend to.
Mm.
Because I think I grew up thinking I shouldn't be angry about things like this.
Ah,
I
okay.
shouldn't let anger control me, or anger is bad.
Mm.
Whereas anger is really a natural reaction,
Mm.
and it's what you do about it, or actually, it's my relationship to my anger.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's my relationship to what is making me reactive, right?
Mm.
That then gives me the freedom. to say, okay, I need to attend to myself. I'm hurt, or I'm disappointed, or
Mm.
I feel put down, or I'm very anxious, or how
Mm.
could they? That kind of injustice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, injustice. And how am I reacting to this? How am I personalizing it?
Mm.
Getting a little distance or space, and also holding myself with compassion, saying, yeah, it's natural, right? Everybody
Yeah.
would feel this way in this if they were experiencing this.
Mm.
And then so it's self-kindness, I guess, too.
Mm.
Yeah.
As you're describing it, so you're allowing yourself with mindfulness to feel the anger. You're not
Mhm.
making the anger a bad thing, but it's what you're doing with it. So
Mhm.
one way that I'm hearing you say is we're honoring the feeling, how it's felt in the body, but not let action be driven just by pure anger. Right.
Right.
So if it's an injustice, whether it's racial, whatever form of injustice anyone listening is going through,
Mhm.
or feeling life is unfair. A lot of people feel like, I'm gypped out of life,
Right.
right? Like it's unfair. Why do I have to deal with this? Right.
Very much so.
Very much so. So how then do they work with that? Someone
Mm.
goes, no, I don't want to have compassion to anyone, not me, not the person. And but that has a negative impact, doesn't it?
Right, it
Yeah.
does, and a lot of times we don't want to look at anger because it's really scary.
Mm.
So we don't wanna look at things that hurt, and so in a way, it's a courageous act, right? To
Mm.
understand our anger or to see what is our anger telling us.
Mm.
And for me, a lot of times in the right now in my life, in interpersonal things that I get stuck, the message that I tell myself is I'm not good enough.
Mm.
That I am being criticized. That's why I'm reacting, even though I'm creating that criticism in my mind.
Our
Yeah.
mind loves doing that, doesn't it?
Oh my
Puts us
goodness.
down. It's so good at that. Like it's like whoop shows up again. Like, oh, look at you. You didn't do this. You should have done this. Da, da, da. The judge, the really
Total.
the very unfair judge.
Yes,
Talk about unfair.
totally.
Our mind can be an unfair judge.
Yeah, and it's letting go of that judgment. I continuously struggle with that,
Mm,
"Oh, here it is again. Here
yeah.
it is again."
So it's a couple of things you're sharing about. One of them is how to be with anger.
Mhm.
But also, what I heard you say earlier is, anger or mindfulness, feeling anger with mindfulness doesn't mean inaction. It's actually a form of activism,
Right, it
right? I
is.
mean, that's what Thich Nhat Hanh represented, like working on peace, or
Yes.
Gandhi did. I mean,
Gandhi and
yeah,
Dr. Martin Cu Luth
Luther King,
Martin King,
exactly.
right, yes.
It's not through hate,
No,
but
it's not.
it's also not in action.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
and knowing that we can only take action in a responsible way when we are calm and we're not
Mm,
acting out of hate, right, or
mm,
anger. It's only when we are at peace with ourselves that we can engage meaningfully for justice,
yeah.
and it took me a long time to understand that. It really did, and I think it was through
Mm,
the teachings of Black mindfulness teachers that I learned about that.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
And they talk about suffering,
mm.
right? And when they talk about suffering, it is really an immense suffering of what it means to be Black in
Yeah,
North America.
yeah.
The legacy of what that means,
Mm,
that suffering, and to really being in touch and open and being able to also transcend that,
ah,
right? And they talk about understanding themselves as people and not a racial construct that society has put on them.
mm,
So there's a internal liberation there.
mm.
Mm,
So not being seen as just this, like pigeonhole, like these
right,
people or whatever
right.
race it is, but these people, like if it's that's what you mean,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Seeing as people. people as
Right,
yeah,
and seeing ourselves as people, right? So
yeah,
as a Japanese woman, I've had a dose of what it what a woman
mhm,
is in Japan, or what is what is acceptable as a Japanese woman.
yeah,
So I think for many, many years, I've pulled myself into
mm,
what I can do, what I can't do, judging by certain standards.
right,
Right. And so understanding how I put myself in a little box or hole
mm,
because of the standards imposed on women in Japan.
yeah,
Or now as I age and I in a wonderful group of women who I meditate
mm,
with through
mm,
Space of Meditating. We have a lovely group where we talk about aging and spiritual
mm,
aging. And it's also aging too, right? Society puts people who are aging in a certain kind of box.
yeah,
And we start putting ourselves in a box
mm,
as well. There's a common theme
mm,
around being a woman, being a person of color, but also in Japan, I'm a member of the majority, which makes me sensitive to what am I not seeing as a person
oh,
in a majority, at being a majority, a person of belonging to that majority group, and also the aging process. So,
mm. Wow,
mm.
so many like multi-layered,
Yes.
multi-dimensional being. Like there's so many aspects. I guess it depends where you are, who you're with, the context. So I'd love to explore as well aging and being with aging, but I just want to go back to something you're saying about African American writers and authors who
Mhm,
speak about suffering. And the one thing you're naming, which is really lands, is just letting us ourselves feel that the suffering.
mhm.
But I guess there's a line between not just dwelling in hopelessness of suffering. And I think
Right,
sometimes people confuse that, like, oh, mindfulness is just about let's suffer and talk about how just like how are you suffering today? Like,
right, right, exactly.
so what would you say to that, just to help listeners understand that?
So my understanding
Yeah,
is, and I cannot talk about the African American experience
right.
or these teachers, but my understanding of what they have done through their training. So mindfulness, I think, helps us accept suffering
Mm,
and create that space for pain and to experience that pain in a way that you no longer become reactive to that.
mm,
So
ah,
it's the acceptance of the human condition, which is the first noble truth. You know, one of the lessons that the Buddha himself learned
mm.
when he went out of the gates of his palace or the compound that he was living and
Mm,
finding that life included sickness and death, right?
uh,
And so it's the condition of it's a human condition
yeah,
that there is suffering
mm,
and that, yeah, so understanding that and really accepting that without being beaten by that.
yeah,
You know, it's having a
that's it.
container. Mm,
Yeah. I love how he did, those who were just listening, sort of YouTube, like you put your hand up, like you're feeling water in your hand, just like
right.
holding a container,
Holding
being a
yeah,
container for ourselves, so we can be that for others to hold suffering. Just,
right.
I mean, nobody asks for suffering or wants it, but it's it's part of life, isn't it? And how do we be with it so we can enjoy the good moments in life, right?
Right,
Because if we can't hold
exactly.
suffering, like you said beautifully, if we can't hold suffering, then we're just reacting and we're upset and we're creating more hate and anger, and we're fueling the fires, like literal fires,
Right,
but the fires that exist globally with the different injustices.
right.
Yeah.
And it's only when we are able to understand and accept and be kind to our suffering that then we can really understand the suffering of others
Mm,
and be kind and compassionate towards their suffering. I mean, ultimately, we are one, right?
yeah.
So, yeah.
See that is a powerful way of saying it, and I can see some saying, "Wait a minute, I'm not one. I'm not like this one." Like
Hmm.
if someone's on the other political side or aisle,
Yeah,
or like, "Oh, I'm one of them. You're one of them," but well, you're there and I'm here, and we're not the same because you're supporting this political person. How? you must be a bad person, or if you're supporting this person, you must be whatever.
Yeah, that's such an important
Yeah.
question, especially today, right?
Yes.
So,
The
I don't have
political
the yeah,
climate.
political I don't have the answers, but this is what I have observed and
Mm,
read. So it's not me so much, but what I'm learning in my meditation groups, Space to Meditate.
mm,
So one of the members during the inauguration held a silent session so
mm,
that people could sit together during the inauguration because
mm.
it's so hard.
Yes. This is
Yeah.
of Donald Trump, the
Yes,
inauguration.
yes,
Yes, yeah.
yes. Sorry, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
the US.
That's right.
Yeah, you're in Canada.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's very difficult right now being in Canada as
Yes.
well. I mean, it's difficult not to get so angry and worked
Yeah.
up by the
Yes.
rhetoric, right? And so I learned from that is to first sit and to be calm and to be in community with
Mm,
people who understand the way one feels when this happens,
mm,
right? So that's one thing I learned is community. A community where you can be silent, not talking so much about, oh my goodness, this is happening, this is going to happen, this, and that, right? First, the silence. So that's something I learned from the members of the Space to
mm,
Meditate group. And then John, Aaron, and Upayati, who are the guiding teachers, also talk about the breath and the importance of just breathing.
mm,
Before thinking of action, just breathing and grounding ourselves. So that's another thing that I'm learning
mm,
and caring about ourselves. And this is something that is talked about not just in mindfulness communities,
mm,
but knowing what you can take and what you can't take. So, you
mm.
know, not being glued to the television or the news. Just
Ah, yes.
so I don't watch the news right now where I see these images of all
Yeah.
that that this person is doing or that people who follow him and all this.
Yeah.
I mean, it is and yet being informed, so I read about it,
Yeah.
right? And being informed and trying to understand what all of this is about. And
Mm,
there are a lot of wonderful mindfulness teachers that talk about this. I read about what they're saying as well. So
mm.
that's very helpful to me
Yeah.
to have this community of people with wisdom.
Mm.
Yeah.
Feels spacious as you say that because it's easy for us to contract in having a conversation
Mhm.
when we're just fueling each other about how bad it is.
Right.
And sometimes people misunderstand this as like, oh, we're just minimizing it, so we're not talking about it. It's actually no, just let's have a space, you're saying, to ground ourselves, to hold a space for ourselves, for our own pain, the
Right.
hurt we feel from whatever it is, if it is the Donald Trump or whoever, if it could be someone's boss or someone's family member,
Yes.
someone's neighbor that they're hurt by, or whatever, holding space first
Right.
for us to see what is the wise action that might be needed,
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
otherwise, is we're just adding like more fuel to the fire.
Right.
Mm.
And also being compassionate towards the suffering that so many people who are being targeted are going through.
Mm, right.
People losing their jobs, people being deported, people being incarcerated.
Yeah.
Right? Just the sheer number of people who are
Mm,
suffering as a result of all these actions that are being taken under the name of executive order by Donald
wow.
Trump, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and Elon Musk. And that compassion hopefully translates into our daily actions so that we can also be kinder to other people in our world, even though like I'm in Japan, I'm
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
we're not directly targeted, and yet Japan has a huge international community of workers who are
Mm.
being exploited for their labor,
Oh.
inexpensive labor. And so
In
just
Japan.
in Japan,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
because we don't have enough workers in Japan.
Oh.
So there are a lot of people from Asia, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Philippines, and so they are being exploited in Japan. And so these are very small things that I do, but just just holding compassion and trying to, strike a conversation, trying to let them know that I see
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the really tiny things, and yet this is sort of things that we can do in the midst of.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
without seeking anything in return, but just being a human being, a
Yeah,
fellow
that's
human
what's
being to another human being, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that is action.
Yeah, that is
That's
action.
action, right? So
Yeah.
a conversation. I mean, connecting with
Yeah.
humanity. It's
Yes.
because it can feel hopeless when
Yes.
someone is just watching the news about whatever the current disaster, and there's so many bad things happening like
Right.
throughout. But um, back to what you said earlier, like how do we stay informed,
Right.
but put limits on it?
Yes.
And maybe here's another way, and I wonder, just something that came up for me was, would listening to less news
Mhm.
be a form of activism, be a form of resistance, of
Yes.
saying I don't want to fuel the attention grabbing,
Right.
fear producing.
Right. And I sometimes think that the news, they make money off of catastrophizing things.
Yes.
Yeah. So being aware of that too and not being sucked into that,
Mm,
right? And hopefully I'm hoping that I will be led to something where I can contribute, right? Whether
yeah.
later it might be a demonstration or marching, not in I mean, not necessarily in
Yeah.
Japan,
Yeah.
but when I used to live in New York, I would join marches and demonstrations and,
Mm,
just a sign of support.
yeah.
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 And then I think as a teaching in the social work school, creating a space, right, where people can come together.
Mm,
Actually, that happened after the 2016 elections or during all the police brutalities, creating a place where people could get together, and
mm,
especially student leaders that were just so horrified with what was going on.
yeah.
Yeah, and creating that space so that then we can all together in a way that we are not so reactive. Take
Yeah.
action. Yeah.
But it's a beautiful theme I'm hearing from you. It's community.
Mm,
Like communities, being of one another, holding space for one another, feeling each other's suffering and sitting with it so we can take
right.
wise action again. So there's something about, because it can be really isolating to
Yes.
be listening to bad stuff and then withdraw from people, disconnect from people, and it can really spiral.
Right.
So I guess this compassion, and mindfulness has so many layers. So I wonder if you can mention some things about mental health and well-being. I mean, clearly, as you're describing it, I'm sold on it myself.
Of
But someone
course.
might be listening and might be thinking, so is there like mental health benefits if I'm more
Yes.
compassionate and I am a little more mindful?
That's a wonderful question,
Mm,
and thank you. So I look back, so I was a clinical social worker. I had a private practice.
mm,
I'm also a family therapist, right? I was a family individual therapist. I worked with couples, I worked with families. And before my learning about mindfulness and really starting practicing mindfulness, or once I started practicing mindfulness, I realized, wow, the mental health field is so pathology oriented.
yeah,
Right? So as a clinician or as a student, it was like we learned how to make diagnoses. We learned about negative family dynamics. We learned about negative couple interactions and the loop that
mm,
couples get into, which are all important
yeah,
to
yeah.
understand.
It's not the whole
But
picture.
no, that's not the whole picture. And also, as students, or mental health practitioners, we're always studying the latest diagnosis or the latest negative dynamic right, to understand phenomenon. So it's really from a perspective of lack.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing that I really, really realized of what the field that I had been in. And I think I was a competent therapist because I worked with people and I thought about their strength in a lot of caring and listening.
Yes.
And yet the field itself. is very problematic.
Right.
And then we start thinking that we're smart as therapists because we understand what the negative dynamics are,
Yeah.
or we can tell between this diagnosis and that diagnosis, or this personality disorder, or that personality disorder, which, personality disorders is a real negative, very hurtful framework to
Yeah.
judge a person, right?
Yeah.
It's people's survival skills.
Mm.
So that's one thing that I think mindfulness contributes to mental health and
Yeah.
well-being is what kind of labels have you been given by people?
Yes.
What kind of labels have you accepted by society?
Yeah.
So that to me has been very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So using mindfulness in terms of mental health, one thing is to recognize we're more than a diagnosis someone gives us or not,
Right,
and it's not we are not that whether
right,
depression or it's like yes we're having all these symptoms and yes sometimes I remind people all the diagnostic criteria are
mhm,
helpful in terms of communication between professionals so we know oh we're talking about this and then
right,
we can work on treatment but it doesn't mean the person is that
right,
that
exactly.
this is and there's that's it this is all there is you are this type of diagnosis
Right,
you're this disorder I just yeah it just doesn't never
right.
sat with me this
Yeah.
yeah
So we're living with symptoms of depression, but that doesn't mean we
yeah
are a depressed person,
yeah
right? Yeah, I was reading recently that the diagnoses for children, psychological issues, doubled in the whatever 10 years, the
yeah
different diagnostic categories, you know?
that's a
And
lot.
yeah, and I'm not to take away from how that has helped understand certain
Right,
issues, right? And it
right.
helps parents understand, and it helps children, the child themselves understand,
Yeah,
"Oh, this is the area that I have difficulty with." So, I'm not trashing diagnoses, but when you only get into diagnoses, then that's when you can really lose the sense of humanity.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So then I guess the sense of humanity when someone does practice, if they are, or want to explore
Mhm.
mindfulness, is seeing themselves as more whole, seeing the humanity in
Right,
themselves rather than just a broken part because of a
right.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to quickly thank you for stopping by and watching this content. It truly means the world to me that you're interested in creating positive change. I also want to invite you to join our amazing community. I have free events online about mindfulness, mindfulness based stress reduction, laughter, as well as retreats that you can do from the comfort of your own home. And are you ready for this? Self paced program that you can do about mindfulness and stress reduction. So you can join the newsletter below to stay up to date on all these goodies. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and press that button. It really helps me to keep this content going and reach out to more guests. Thank you so much again, and may you continue enjoying watching this episode.
And it's something that doesn't happen overnight. It's not
Yeah.
like antidepressant medications, it's not like you
Right.
take a pill and it's just a sense of building, it's
Mm.
just it's really developing skills or a way of looking at life, understanding ourselves.
Mm. Which you're right takes time.
It takes
And
time and the patience, the patience,
patience, yes, yeah.
yeah,
And sometimes I remind people, like it doesn't mean you're gonna get no the fruits of your labor are not gonna come up for like years and
right,
years. It will come up sometimes. Few moments of practice, you're already gaining
right,
something.
yeah.
But it takes
It
practice to
takes
break
practice.
old patterns.
Right. And we live in a time when
Yeah.
everything has to happen
Now,
instantaneously.
fast.
It's very scary. I mean, you
Yeah.
order online, it comes the next day, right? Or you're looking for answers. You look at whoa, wow, with ChatGPT and everything, which I
Yeah,
use, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so helpful. And yet you expect that, right, to be there
Yes, we
for
went
us,
quick.
right? I think our sense of time and our expectations are really getting shaped by that right now,
Yeah.
by technology. So, patience, understanding patience, I think this society currently is not helping us with
Yeah.
patience.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Somehow when you're saying this, it made me think of just nature, right?
Mm,
Nature has its own time. You can't
right.
hurry grass and growing, right? I mean, you can nurture it, give it right nutrients, or you planting some
Right.
an apple tree.
Yeah.
It's gonna come up. You
Yeah.
plant the right seeds and over time. But we want just plant the seed tomorrow, eat an apple.
Right. Exactly. It's
We're-
really
that's
true.
like that's amazing. ChatGTP is not gonna make that happen for us. Plant a seed today,
Right.
tomorrow eat an apple.
Yeah. And
Takes
we
time.
don't appreciate growth, the process of growth.
Yeah.
Thinking of trees and appreciating the power of nature and the sun and the wind and the rain and how
Mm.
so many things come together to help a seed develop into a
Mm.
tree, right?
That's
Yeah.
so
And
beautifully.
trees communicating with each other or birds and right, everything. So we are part of a web. And
Mm.
yet, this society currently makes us feel like we're alone and we need
Yeah.
to do everything on our own. And if we can't do it, it's our fault.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we have to create this facade that we're okay, right? Oh yeah, it's a
Yeah.
hard it's a hard
It's
time in society right now.
it
Mhm.
is. It is. And sometimes we forget, because you walk down wherever listener you're listening from, walking down grocery store, or like most people look like, yeah, everything's okay. Life
Yeah.
is normal. This is okay. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But everyone is carrying something we're dealing with.
Yeah.
All right. I mean,
Exactly.
we're all carrying something we're dealing with.
We're human.
We're human. We're carrying something, whether it's from like immediate
Right.
family or relationship or city or town or country, like or something.
Right. And
Yeah.
things happen. Disasters happen. Natural
Yes.
disasters happen. People make disasters happen, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
When you say this, remind me of John Kabat-Zinn's book, Full Catastrophe Living.
Catastrophe.
Like he wrote
Right.
this a while back, and many editions from this book. But it's like, wow, like that story of humanity continues. It's been
Mhm.
around for a long time, living the
Yeah.
full catastrophe of life. So if I might ask you, go back to talking about ways of being with this, the pain, the suffering, all of
Mm.
that, and I've heard you speak about fearlessness. And
Right.
I wonder, where does fearlessness come into play here?
Yeah. So I have been reading a book by Norman Fisher, who is a Zen teacher, and he's also a poet. And this book called The World Could Be Otherwise. And it's a book about the six practices, or it's called perfections, a
Mm,
way of life. And the first perfection is generosity. And he talks about in Buddhism, there's three forms of generosity. One is dana,
mm.
right? The gift of
Yes.
material goods. So we always thank our teachers.
Mhm. Like
Uh,
donation.
Donations,
Yeah.
yeah, donations, yeah. And then the second is spiritual teachings that we
Mm.
offer or the teachers offer. And then the third is fearlessness. And when I saw that, I thought, what? So,
Fearlessness has generosity.
yes,
Haha.
isn't that amazing? And so then I've been really thinking about this a lot, and I'm still a student. I'm still trying to understand, but he talks about, and this is my way of thinking, we all need to feel safe, right?
Mm,
And how do you provide safety to other people, or how do you create a safe environment?
mm,
And that is, we ourselves need to be fearless to be able to create safe environments or fearless
ah,
environments for other people. We ourselves need to be fearless. And that fearlessness, according to Norman Fisher, or according to Buddhism, or
yeah.
his understanding, is that when we understand and understand in our bones that love is part of the universe,
Mm,
right? So the fundamental thing that exists in life is love. And when we can really understand that in our
mm,
bones, then we can offer fearlessness, because then I guess I know that when I really, if and when I can really understand that love is the universe, then I can let go of my fears. And it's difficult because I think as a woman, there's oppression, or as a person of color, there's oppression
Mm.
in places where I'm not a member of the majority, like, and yet still believe that love is part of the universe.
Yeah.
And to be able to let go and to relax in that or to understand that,
Mm.
then I would be able to let go of my defenses,
Wow.
and I would not need to protect myself, and I would be able to let go of my ego. So
Mm.
that's sort of what I'm grappling with right now, and to know that then fearlessness is a part of generosity, to be able to provide fearlessness to people, or right now I'm understanding it is to provide a fearless environment where people do not need to be fearful.
Mm.
So, for example, teaching MBSR and creating a class environment with the participants, because it's not just the
Yes.
teachers, as you know, it's the
Of course,
participants
yeah.
that create the safe
Yeah.
self environment. And it's facilitating that self environment where all of us, the teachers, just all of us who happen to be teaching, or
Yes.
people who are participating, although we're all participating, we're all students, can create an environment where we don't need to feel fearful. That's
Mm.
what that's an example of what I get from what Norman Fisher is saying about
Mm.
fearlessness as generosity.
Yeah. Ah, beautifully described. And you're naming the MBSR. So those are new to that. It's mindfulness-based stress reduction program,
Right.
an 8-week program in working with stress, illness, and pain. And
Yes, in an environment that is safe, that everybody
yeah.
creates together, right? We come in as individuals, and yet by 8 weeks, we're a community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So this fearlessness, generosity is creating a safe space for us to feel our fears, but be fearless.
Right,
Right.
right.
Right. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be able to live with our vulnerability.
Yeah.
Being vulnerable, I think, is being fearless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I'm working with right
Yeah.
now. Yeah. Saki Santorelli,
Mhm.
who was one of the main teachers
Yeah.
of MBSR with John Kabat-Zinn, he has a lovely book called Heal Thyself,
Yeah.
and I'm in the process of translating it into Japanese with my
Oh,
colleagues.
beautiful.
Yeah, and he really talks about this vulnerability, and when we can live with our own vulnerability, then that's when, we can also hold the vulnerability of others as well. And I think that
Mm.
also relates to fearlessness, like when we do not fear our own vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so how do we not fear our own vulnerability? It's almost like, you're jumping knowing that the universe will be there for you.
Mm.
Mm.
So there's some trust.
There's some trust,
Some
and I was
trust.
yes,
And but also, you naming like the MBSR and like a community that feels safe, allowing people to connect to really something that's comfortably raw for them that we want to speak about. Because
right,
nobody's asked to speak about something they don't want, but
right,
there's something very vulnerable and really beautiful,
and
a-
courageous,
courageous,
which is
and so connecting. Like I
yeah,
can feel that when I teach, and I'm teaching right now, actually, middle of teaching MBSR, and it's just like the beauty
mhm,
when someone speaks their truth and others
yes,
relate to it. And then
mhm,
how do we be with this with mindfulness? How do we feel it?
right.
It's just really a deep connection.
And I think that is
Yeah.
part of fearlessness, right?
Yeah.
It's a gift. We're giving each other the gift of fearlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause isn't it easy to put a mask and there's like, "All is
Yes,
well," all right? Like,
yes,
that's why it's
yes.
fearless, like, it's like putting down that mask with the right
Right.
people, of course, right?
Mhm.
That's why
Right
you
people, yes.
that's why you began it to saying, like, safety, like, being and it's like, so that's healing.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
healing. Yeah.
Mm.
And we're healers for each other.
Just important to remember, not alone.
Mm,
Whatever you're listening from, you're not alone.
right.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can't heal ourselves. We can only heal in relationship with others.
Mm.
Mm,
Oh, that's such an important point.
mm. That's something that Saki Santarelli talks about with Rumi,
Hmm.
the Persian poet. Yeah, don't think that you can heal yourself. It's through opening ourselves towards others that then, the light
Mm.
comes through the
Place.
bandage places.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Which
yeah.
is risky,
It's
right?
risky. Yeah,
Risky, but then on the
yeah,
other side of risky, there's a doorway of possibility for
right.
healing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think psychotherapy, really helpful psychotherapy, is going through the bandage places that hurt.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful, psychotherapy can also be a band-aid,
Yeah.
serve as a band-aid without thinking about healing, right? It's
Yeah.
more fixing rather than healing.
Yeah. Something broken.
Broken, yeah.
A lot of the models we have in the West is some brokenness, like a machine.
Brokenness.
You got to fix the
Right.
machine without
Yeah.
human. Right.
And yet brokenness is we're that's part of being human.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I really appreciate talking with you like this, cousin, because it's through our conversation
Yeah.
that I'm learning, realizing, recognizing, right? So it's an interaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was sharing with you earlier before the recording. That's one of the things I really enjoy is just the
Mm,
conversation because things come up in conversation about areas that mean a lot to us. Right? It's
right.
like here's something. This is real. This is real life, real teachings, real struggles, real things we got to deal with.
And I'm appreciating the way you're talking because I really feel heard.
Mm.
Your way of listening. I
Ah,
appreciate that.
thank you.
No, your presence, your sense of presence, I really appreciate.
Thank you so much. It's truly I feel captivated by your words. So thank you. No, I really appreciate this conversation,
Mm.
and something else as well, which may require fearlessness too, is aging.
Yes.
So, from your not only your work but personal experience, can you just share with us what is this aging of like our own aging? I know I'm like all of a sudden I have a lot more white hair on the top of my head, size of my head.
Yeah,
Aging
so
family members, aging
right.
pets, like
So right now I'm in my life situation where aging is one of the areas of that promotes the most growth, or facilitates growth, which means this is an area that I'm struggling the most. So my father is going to be 100 at the end of this month. It's such a
wow.
gift to be able to be with my father. Often I forget that he's no longer 50 or 60,
Yeah.
right? And so my expectations, and then if he's getting weaker, I feel like it's my fault, which is judgment.
Right.
Or I should be doing more.
Yes, yes, yes.
I should be doing more. And so that's part of that space, right? Between my
Mm,
thoughts, my reactions, and oh, this is him,
mm. It's
Yeah.
not your fault that he's aging. Right. Yes.
Oh, this is fascinating, cousin, because I think I also feel like it's my fault that I'm aging.
Right. What are we doing? This is supposed to stop the aging, right? Like I'm taking my vitamins. How come aging is still happening?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. The conceptions we have, like aging is not okay in our
Yeah.
society, right? Yeah. So that's one thing about mindfulness and aging is really seeing aging from another perspective other than what is socially constructed in our
Mm,
society about aging.
mm.
And it's constant, like, how do I want to look, right? Do I want to look younger? I
Right.
don't know if that's for you,
Mm.
custom, but women go through, do I color my hair, not color my hair? Do I
Right.
do makeup? Do I do I dress? What age? What does the way I wear my clothes say about my age? I mean, it
Right.
is like we are inundated
Mm,
by ageism
yeah.
in our society. So when somebody helps me,
Mm.
although I think it's not because they think I'm old,
Oh,
maybe they're just
so it's
helping me.
assumptions.
What I mean? Assumptions and my thoughts and the
Yeah.
beliefs that I have about myself. And that brings stress,
Right.
right? It's stressful.
Yeah. So it could be an act of kindness, regardless of age, but then you become aware of, oh, you're quite like,
Are they judging me, right?
yeah,
Without my just being able to say, "Oh, thank you. How lovely."
yeah.
And it's their caring, whereas I interpret that negatively, and it's like 1 second it happens.
Really appreciate you like naming it this way. So
Mm.
there's a form of stress that also comes with aging. It's the perception of what are people, how are they viewing us, right?
Right.
Are they viewing us this way? And unfortunately, it does exist too. Like
Does
a
exist.
lot of people do make assumptions like that, about whether
Right.
health or intelligence or whatever it
Right.
is. And I know people who are like 10 years older than me that I wouldn't stand a chance climbing a mountain with them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
so, but there's a lot of assumptions that this age means this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the women who actively engage,
Mm,
in changing the stereotypes or challenge the stereotype,
yeah.
and that is a form of activism, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
so
So it's both that challenging the stereotypes, but there's also, with mindfulness, I wonder what's your sense of it. A certain amount of like accepting is such a big word sometimes, but
no,
but
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 that's true, it's
but it's like
acceptance.
this is the season right now. Like
Yes, this is the
being
sea
in
yeah,
this beautiful season, like
yes,
rather than I just want the old one and
right.
yeah.
And it is a beautiful season, and I also think about the end of life, right? We start to
Mm,
think about the end of life naturally because I've retired from academia, and
mm,
so it's equanimity that also mindfulness teaches us the
yeah.
balance, right? So being able to see the joy and the sadness of
Mm,
future decline or things are going to change and yet not being captivated only by the things, the sadness or the decline, which is part of life and
yeah.
humanity, and also being able to embrace the joy and the wisdom. I mean, life is much easier now. It is, it's great. Like, not just thanks to mindfulness, and also though, living a life, really, we accumulate wisdom.
Yeah.
Some through pain and vulnerability, and yet it's there. It's like this fertile ground that we create, right? The
Mm,
compost. There's a poem about how everything becomes a wonderful compost. Our sorrows, our sadness, our
yeah.
hurt, And so as we age, our compost is lovely. I mean, it is really, there's a lot of treasures
Ah,
as we age. And so it's sad that a lot of times we're not encouraged to look and appreciate that because of
mm.
society and what society says about aging.
Yeah.
Mm,
So yeah, it's try to slow down the clock, stop the clock, associated with like negative things rather than it's like what a beautiful description of this a rich, fertile soil that has
right.
so much deep wisdom over
Yes.
years and appreciating years,
Yes.
like the true meaning of like wisdom and
Yeah.
respect and
Yeah.
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 Mm.
And being wise enough to know that we're not that wise,
Yeah, yeah.
That's also part of wisdom.
Because I guess that comes with pressure too, right? It's like, and that's also a form of, I don't know, certain biases of this person is this age, they must know everything about the world, or they
Right.
must like. There's a lot of like, there's good stereotypes and negative stereotypes, but I guess that comes with it too, like this
Right. Yeah.
stereotype of rather than
Yeah.
it's a human who's lived a life, still living a
Right.
life.
Yeah, and so really, I think recognizing the lenses through which we see the world, especially the ageism lens
Mm,
that we are so entrenched with constantly.
mm.
and the way we judge ourselves.
Mm.
And I'm saying that to as somebody who's learning about that and living that and constantly
Yeah.
struggling with that. So, you know, yeah.
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 And then when you say this, it's like there's less resistance to what is.
Mhm.
Less resistant to the changes in the body, or less resistance to it's like, oh, this is
Ah,
this is
right. So we don't need to glorify aging and we don't need to put down aging.
yeah,
Just as is.
yeah,
The stillness of this is.
yes.
Yeah.
You just remind me of something, which is, I know you mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh earlier when we began, and I had a chance. He visited Toronto, and I'm in Vancouver, so
Oh, uh-huh.
went to Toronto on a retreat, and all the monastics came in, and the monks, and it was just beautiful. And one of the monks was talking about this,
Mm,
and I don't know, the way that he spoke about it really like resonated, like it made it something beautiful, almost like watching like a flower growing and changing, a leaves changing,
mm.
like he say, like, my face today doesn't look like my face a week ago or a month
Yeah.
ago, my hair, my eyebrows don't look the same. And I was like, what? At the time, what do you mean? It's gonna change? Like, I mean, we all
Yeah.
know this, but the way he said it, like, it was with fondness,
Yeah.
like, this is, and it's like that really touched me,
Yeah.
like being observant and aware in the process of changing within us, like
Right.
being witness to the changing form.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
beautiful. Yes.
yeah,
And reminder that everything is always in motion. Everything
yeah,
is constantly changing. Yeah. And
mm,
not getting stuck, right? Yeah. And
yeah,
attaching to that,
yeah,
getting attached to something. Yeah.
yeah. Or things staying the same way. That we
Yeah.
struggle with that, like, all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All of us struggle
yeah,
with
yeah,
that.
totally.
Yeah.
Like,
It's a source of stress.
the stress. I was sharing with you before we began too that I have a puppy now, and some of the
Uh-huh.
listeners may have heard. I was thinking about her for a while, and one of the thoughts I had already. I'm like, wow, this boy is gonna grow, and one day not gonna be here. I mean, he's
Mm.
still a puppy, like 8 weeks old, right? But
Mhm.
it's like, that's a nature. Let me enjoy him today.
Mhm.
He's good. Let me enjoy him tomorrow. And, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, let me enjoy him. Let me be with him.
Yeah.
And as he's changing day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that gives you joy.
It does. It can be
Yeah.
there. I can be there for him.
Yeah.
Right? Including all his whining as a puppy. Well, this has been so, so enjoyable. Truly,
Mm.
like, on or off podcast. Just so love being with you, and having conversation, and just dialoguing about life, and just realities. So, I wonder if I can ask you one more thing, which I'm curious about all my guests, in terms of the name of the podcast is Pause to Elevate. Right?
Wow.
Pause to
Mhm.
elevate. And you've been sharing so many ways that pausing helps, and working with justice, working with yourself, aging, like all different ways. So, what is it for you, moments of pausing, whether it's practice of mindfulness or ways of pausing, you're like, oh, that's me. That was meaningful for me. Is there something comes to
Mhm.
mind? I'm sure you have a lot, but that pause supported you.
One of the things that comes to mind when you ask that question is
Mm.
pause helps me not believe in my thoughts, helps me not to like determine how things are going to be.
Mm.
Pause helps me not to judge myself. Pause helps me not to judge others. And pause helps me to appreciate. So, right now, there's birds singing outside
Mhm.
because it's morning now in Japan, in Tokyo. And so, pause helps me appreciate like the sounds of nature.
Mm.
So, there's a lot of things that I appreciate about pause.
Even the way you described it, I felt spacious.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, the way you described the pause, like, you really, felt you connecting to that pause as you spoke. I
mm,
really felt it, like
mm.
the possibility of a more spacious life in the middle of whatever is happening.
Isn't that amazing about pause?
Yeah, yeah.
Pause is really amazing.
Pause is really, yeah, pause is a good
Amazing.
thing.
And yet our world right now, it gives us so few opportunities to pause, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm appreciating pause
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
throughout the conversation. Thank you.
It's so true, isn't it? This pause, and sometimes we have to pause to remember pausing. You know,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
same here. I guess I get caught up. I'm like, oh wow, things
Yeah.
can speed up quickly for all of us. Whatever, especially if there's stress. The more there's stress, the more there's less space to pause,
Mhm.
and the more important it is. I feel really take a
Yeah.
moment. It doesn't have to be long. You know, if listeners, it doesn't have to be long. It could be just a few breaths. Just pause, a few
Yeah.
breaths, and
Yes.
see what's possible. Thank you so much. And I'm wondering if listeners want to learn more about your work and what you offer. What I'll put it in the show notes.
Sure.
Is there a website you want me to direct folks to, or
Yeah, so,
contact or social
what
media?
I didn't it's fine for you if you want to post my email. That's probably the easiest.
Yes.
Yes, so I will give you my email, or you
Yes.
have
I
actually,
have
you
it. Yeah,
have
yeah.
my
I can put that. Yeah, for sure.
right? So, please feel free to share that with the,
Okay.
listeners, and it would be lovely to hear from the listeners. I would really welcome, interaction, and yeah, that'll be lovely.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
I'll definitely I'll put that in the show notes
okay,
for sure.
great.
And really deep gratitude to you, to who you are, to how you live your life,
Mm.
to just beautiful conversation. I really enjoyed this and look forward to more of this outside of here too.
Yes, and
And
thank you so much.
thank you so much.
It's been such a joy and pleasure, and, oh, a reminder about pausing too.
Yes.
A confirmation of pausing.
That's right. That's right. A reminder, remembering to pause.
Remembering to
Remembering to
pause,
pause.
yeah, yeah.
So thank you. And I want to thank all the listeners for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, for watching. May your moments be filled with ease and may you be present in as many of them.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.